I always thought I was the quiet one in the family. Growing up in Boulder, Colorado, I was the type of girl who followed the rules, helped my mom in the kitchen, and studied hard. My younger brother, Ryan, was the opposite. Wild, charming, always getting into trouble, but somehow still the golden child. My father adored him. At every family dinner, Dad would brag about Ryan's latest big idea, or the fact that he always had potential, even when Ryan was flunking out of community college. I, on the other hand, graduated early, got a steady job, bought my own condo by 28, and still, it felt like I was invisible. When our mother passed away, things shifted. I started visiting Dad more, checking in weekly, making sure he had groceries, helping him organize paperwork. Ryan, as usual, disappeared for months at a time and only came around when he needed money. Still, Dad defended him like clockwork. "He's just going through a rough patch," he'd say. I stopped arguing after a while. What was the point? But then, a few months before my father passed, I noticed something strange. One day, while helping Dad clean out his home office, I found a thick envelope labeled Estate, Jennifer's copy. I froze. I didn't open it, but I asked him about it. He brushed it off like it was nothing. "Just some old papers, honey. Don't worry yourself with that." But something about the way he avoided eye contact lingered with me. 3 weeks later, he had a stroke. It was sudden, brutal, and within 48 hours he was gone. I barely had time to grieve before Ryan swooped in, acting like he was in charge of everything. Decisions, funeral plans, even the keys to Dad's house. When I asked about the will, he said, "Dad didn't leave much. But don't worry, I'll make sure you get something." That something turned out to be nothing. At the reading of the will, I sat there in stunned silence as the lawyer read line after line. Everything, from the house to the savings account to the antique coin collection, was left to Ryan. My name wasn't even mentioned. I remember the blood draining from my face, my heartbeat pounding so loud it drowned out the lawyer's voice. Ryan leaned back in his chair, smug as ever, like he had just won a prize. And that's when it hit me. He thought I wouldn't fight. He thought I'd stay the quiet daughter, the overlooked one. But he was wrong. I barely slept the night after the will was read. I kept turning everything over in my head. How could Dad have done that to me? After everything I'd done, all the time I spent with him, the errands, the care, the calls? How could he leave me with nothing? But deep down, I didn't believe it. Not because I was in denial, but because of that envelope. The one labeled Estate, Jennifer's copy. I woke up the next morning determined to find it. I drove to Dad's house, where Ryan was already there, sipping coffee on the porch like he owned the place. Which, technically, now he did. "You can't just walk in here," he said, blocking the door. "This is mine now." I held my ground. "I'm just here for a few of Dad's personal items. You got everything else, remember?" He shrugged. "Suit yourself, just don't take anything valuable." His arrogance made my stomach turn, but I bit my tongue. I walked straight to the home office. The envelope had been in the bottom drawer of the old filing cabinet, but when I opened it, it was gone. Go on. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I stood there, frozen, gripping the cabinet, heart sinking. Then I noticed something. An indentation, almost like an envelope had sat there for a long time and was recently removed. The dust patterns didn't lie, and suddenly it all made sense. Ryan had found it before me. I confronted him. "Where's the envelope Dad left with my name on it?" He raised an eyebrow, playing dumb. "What envelope?" "Don't play games with me, Ryan. I saw it. Before he passed, he said it was old paperwork. But he didn't throw it out. You took it." He laughed like I was crazy. "Jen, come on. Maybe you dreamed it. Grief messes with your head." I left that day shaking with anger. Not just because of the missing envelope, but because I knew now that something wasn't right. I started making calls. First to Dad's old attorney, who told me he hadn't updated his will in nearly 5 years. That meant whatever changes he made recently weren't in that official version. So I hired a probate lawyer. A good one. Someone with experience in disputed wills. And as soon as I told her about the envelope, she leaned forward and said something that stuck with me. If that envelope exists, and if it contains any kind of written amendment or handwritten codicil, we can challenge the will. But you'll need proof. Proof. I had no idea how I'd find it. But I also knew one thing for sure. I wasn't backing down. Hiring the lawyer lit a fire in me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't letting someone else steer the wheel. Especially not Ryan. I started retracing every step, every conversation with Dad in the last year of his life, and one thing kept tugging at me. Dad's safe. He had this small, wall-mounted safe behind a picture in his bedroom. It wasn't fancy, just something he picked up at a hardware store. I remembered because I helped him install it after a break-in down the street. At the time, I asked what he was planning to keep in there. He just smiled and said, "The important stuff, not just valuables. Things I want handled right." That memory came rushing back like a tidal wave. If the envelope wasn't in the filing cabinet anymore, maybe it had never stayed there. Maybe he moved it to the safe for protection. But the problem was, I didn't know the code. Only Dad did. Still, I had a hunch. When I was a teenager, Dad used to joke that he'd never forget my birthday because it was the luckiest day of his life. He said it so often that I once teased him, "You should make it your password." So I tried. June 14. 6:14. But the safe popped open with a soft beep, and I swear my hands trembled. Inside was a small stack of documents. Most were insurance papers, birth certificates, but wedged between two folders was the envelope. It was still sealed, on the front in Dad's familiar handwriting. "To Jennifer, in case something happens." I sat on the floor and opened it right then and there. Inside was a handwritten note. A codicil. Dad wrote that he had intended to amend the will officially but hadn't gotten around to it. In the note, he clearly stated that he wanted me to inherit 50% of the house and all of his personal savings account. He also mentioned that Ryan had struggled with responsibility and should only receive limited access to funds via a trust. It wasn't notarized, but it was signed and dated 2 months before he died. I clutched the letter to my chest and burst into tears. It wasn't just about the money, it was the validation. The acknowledgement that Dad had seen me, that I did matter. I took pictures of everything, sent scans to my lawyer, and I knew this wasn't over. Ryan had lied. He'd tried to erase me. But I had the truth in my hands now, and I was going to use it. I didn't call Ryan right away. I needed to be smart. My lawyer, Melissa, said the codicil might not hold up as a full legal amendment since it wasn't notarized, but it could still be powerful evidence, especially if paired with a pattern of behavior, like me caring for Dad regularly, like Ryan being absent, like him mysteriously ending up with everything and me with nothing. Melissa's advice was clear. Don't let him know what you have. Yet. Let's file a formal petition to contest the will first. That'll catch him off guard. I agreed, but part of me burned to confront him face to face. A few days later, I got my chance. Ryan invited me to Dad's house, his house now as he called it, to talk like adults. I think he expected me to beg for a check, to plead for scraps. That's what he'd always assumed about me, that I was too soft to stand up for myself. I showed up calm, collected, and carrying nothing but my phone. He poured himself a drink, didn't even offer me one. "So, you're mad, I get it. But this was Dad's decision. He probably thought you'd be fine on your own. You always were the responsible one." I narrowed my eyes. "Cut the crap, Ryan. You found the envelope, didn't you?" He froze. Just for a second. Then smirked. "I have no idea what you're talking about." I leaned in. "You do." Because you took it. Or maybe you read it and figured you could just ignore it since it wasn't filed officially, but I found it. In the safe. His glass clinked on the table a little too hard. You went through Dad's safe? You mean my father's safe? In the house he wanted me to have a part of? Yeah. And guess what? The note's signed and dated. It might not be perfect in the court's eyes, but it's enough to make the judge take a closer look. His face flushed. That's not going to hold up. It's just a note. You're wasting your time and money. I stood up. We'll see about that. As I walked out, I could feel him watching me. Silent. Maybe for the first time in his life. He wasn't laughing anymore. Back in my car, I exhaled. My hands were still shaking. I had never talked to him like that before, but it felt good. I wasn't the quiet one anymore. For the first time in my life, I had power. Not just because of what was written in the envelope, but because I finally believed I had the right to stand up for myself. And I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. Filing the petition was like throwing a lit match into a room soaked with gasoline. Within a week of submitting the formal challenge to the will, Ryan's lawyer contacted Melissa. He wanted to talk settlement. That's legal code for he's nervous. And he should be. But I wasn't interested in settling, not yet. Melissa explained that challenging a will isn't easy. Courts generally prefer to uphold whatever is officially filed. But in my case, we had a few key things working in our favor. The codicil, my consistent caregiving, and Ryan's history of financial irresponsibility. On top of that, we subpoenaed Dad's bank records, and guess what? Thousands of dollars had been withdrawn in the weeks before his death. Money Ryan couldn't account for. Still, the legal process was slow and emotionally brutal. I had to relive so much. Emails, texts, memories I'd buried years ago just to keep the peace. Every time I handed over another piece of proof, photos of me helping Dad after his surgery, receipts from grocery runs, bank statements showing Ryan's cash withdrawals. It was like reopening a wound. There were nights I cried until my throat burned, not just from exhaustion, but from grief. Grief over losing my father, yes, but also over the realization that my brother had never really seen me as family. I was just in the way. Friends kept asking why I didn't just let it go. Is it worth all this stress, Jen? They said. Your dad's gone. This won't bring him back. But it wasn't about bringing him back. It was about standing up for what he meant to do. About making sure that his final wishes weren't erased by someone who only showed up when there was something to gain. One morning, I walked into court for our first official hearing. Ryan was already there, wearing a suit that probably still had the tags on. He looked nervous. For once, he didn't flash that arrogant smile. Our case was assigned to a female judge. I don't know why, but that detail made me feel calmer. Maybe I just needed someone who could see me, not just legally, but as a woman fighting to be heard after being dismissed for so long. The judge listened carefully. Melissa presented the codicil, the bank records, the caregiving timeline. Ryan's team tried to paint me as emotional, said I was confused by grief, and suggested the note might have been fabricated. But they didn't know I had a copy of Dad's handwriting from a birthday card he wrote me just weeks before he passed. We had it analyzed. A handwriting expert confirmed it was a match. It wasn't just emotional anymore. It was factual, legal, real. And Ryan knew it. After that first hearing, the tension between Ryan and me turned ice cold. No more fake pleasantries, no more forced smiles. He started avoiding eye contact completely, like maybe deep down he was ashamed. Or maybe he was just afraid of losing. He tried another move shortly after. He offered me $10,000, 0 cents to drop the case. $10,000. My father's house was worth at least $500,000, 0 cents. His savings were over $200, 0 cents, not counting valuables or stocks. And Ryan thought I'd just take a crumb and disappear? He texted me the offer like it was some huge favor. "Let's just end this. It's not worth tearing the family apart." I didn't respond. Because what he didn't understand, what he never understood, was that I wasn't fighting for money. I was fighting to be seen, to not be erased, to make sure that the years I spent taking care of Dad while he disappeared meant something. When my lawyer sent back a formal rejection, Ryan lost it. He sent me a string of angry texts, accusing me of being greedy, of trying to ruin his life, of disrespecting our father's memory. And that's when the mask truly cracked. Because in one of those messages, he slipped up. He wrote, "You think Dad cared more about you just because he wrote some guilt-ridden letter? He told me he'd never file it. He was just trying to make you feel better." I froze. That was it. That one sentence proved Ryan knew about the codicil before I brought it to court, which meant he had seen it and tried to hide it and lied about it in front of a judge. My lawyer was ecstatic. She filed a motion to admit the text as evidence of intent to conceal. The court was starting to see the bigger picture now, not just a disagreement between siblings, but potential fraud. The next time we were in court, Ryan's energy had shifted. He was quieter. His lawyer did all the talking. And the judge? She didn't look impressed. She said she'd need time to review everything, but that we'd reconvene in 2 weeks for her decision. 2 weeks. 14 days of holding my breath, replaying everything, trying to prepare for the worst, but daring, just daring, to hope for the best. Every night I looked at that letter from my dad. His handwriting, his words, his acknowledgement that I mattered. And I whispered the same thing over and over like a prayer. I'm not backing down. The morning of the final hearing, I sat outside the courthouse in my car for almost 15 minutes. My palms were sweaty, my heart wouldn't slow down. I kept looking at a photo I'd tucked into my wallet. One of me and Dad from a summer hike we took 2 years ago. We were both laughing, red-faced and winded at the top of a trail near Estes Park. It reminded me why I was here, why I had to see this through. Inside the courtroom, Ryan looked like a ghost. He avoided my gaze entirely. His lawyer was tense, flipping through papers like they could change the outcome with last-minute scrambling. But it was too late for that. The judge entered. The room fell silent. She didn't waste time. She acknowledged the emotional nature of the case, but made it clear her decision would rest on facts and legal standards. She outlined everything: the official will, the handwritten codicil, my consistent role in Dad's care, the documented financial discrepancies, and, most damning, the text message Ryan had sent me. And then she spoke the words I will never forget. "This court finds that there is sufficient evidence to validate the intent of the deceased to amend his will in favor of the petitioner. While not formally notarized, the codicil paired with supporting documentation and the respondent's own admissions demonstrates clear, willful intent to alter the distribution of the estate." I blinked, then blinked again. Had I won? She continued, assigning me a 50% share of the estate as outlined in Dad's letter. She also ordered an audit of the estate's financial activity during the final weeks of Dad's life, specifically noting Ryan's unexplained withdrawals. My lawyer squeezed my hand. I was still frozen, shocked. And Ryan? His face went red, then white. He didn't yell, he didn't argue, he just stared, stunned, like for the first time in his life someone had told him no, and it stuck. Outside the courtroom, he stormed past me without a word. I stood there for a moment, the Colorado sun shining down through the courthouse windows. I thought I would feel triumphant, but what I really felt was relief. Not just for the money, not even for the legal victory, but for the fact that I'd been heard, that Dad's intentions hadn't been silenced, that I'd stood up, spoken out, and didn't let fear or family guilt hold me back. And the quiet daughter? She didn't just fight. She won. It's been nearly a year since the final court decision. I used my share of the inheritance to do something that, for once, was entirely for me. I left my tiny condo and bought a peaceful little house near Fort Collins, close enough to the hiking trails Dad and I loved, but far enough from the chaos Ryan brought into my life. The house has a garden. I grow tomatoes now, and every morning I sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, listening to the wind in the aspens. It's quiet here, but not in the way I used to feel invisible. It's the kind of quiet that heals. I've kept that letter from Dad in a glass frame on my bookshelf. Not because of the money it represented, but because it was proof that he saw me, that even if he didn't always show it when he was alive, in the end, he wanted to make it right. As for Ryan, we haven't spoken since the hearing. I heard he tried to sell Dad's old truck and got into a legal mess over it because of the estate audit. I don't know the details, and I don't care to. For the first time in my life, I don't feel responsible for managing someone else's chaos. I've also started volunteering at a local women's legal aid center. Nothing formal, just helping women who feel overlooked, erased, or too polite to fight. I sit with them and listen. Because sometimes that's all we really need. Someone to tell us we're not crazy, we're not alone, and we're allowed to fight back. Looking back, I realized that the real battle wasn't about a will. It was about a woman reclaiming her voice. And finally understanding that she was never too quiet. Just too respectful in a world that only listens when you raise your voice. So yes, he thought I wouldn't fight. But I did. And I'll never apologize for it.